Today we're tackling something that might not seem romantic, politics, but trust me, it impacts relationships profoundly. If you wouldn't skip talking about money or kids before marriage, you shouldn't skip politics either. Here's why this conversation matters deeply. Let's start with the big picture. Americans are more politically paired off than ever. In 2020, only about 21% of couples had different party affiliations, a drop from around 30% in 2016, and just 3.6% were strictly Democrat-Republican pairings. That leaves roughly 8 million mixed-party marriages out of around 40 million unions. The trend is clear. People are self-sorting more along political lines. Why does this matter? Because mixed-party couples report noticeably lower relationship satisfaction. Only 47% say they're completely satisfied with family life, compared with 55-61% in same-party pairings. That's nearly a 15-point gap. If one spouse is independent paired with a Democrat, satisfaction drops to just 35%. It gets more intense in the UK. Couples on opposite sides of major political issues are 38% more likely to separate. And if they clashed over Brexit, that risk jumped to 60%. That divorce risk is comparable to mismatches in religion or education. Everyday life can feel strained, too. In one study of Thanksgiving dinners, families divided by party politics stayed around 4 hours together. But those with opposing views left 30-50 minutes early. That's dinners cut short and memories lost. So why is politics so powerful? Because political identity is deeply tied to core moral values, things like fairness, authority, equity, liberty. When spouses clash in politics, they're often clashing on fundamental values. That can lead to self-silencing to avoid conflict, which slowly builds resentment. Still, many couples with political differences stick together. Around 23% of American couples differ in party affiliation. The tricky part is perception. People often feel more politically distant from their partner than they actually are, and those perceived gaps have real emotional impact. Even so, mixed couples who talk frequently and well report the greatest gains through increased political participation and higher relationship satisfaction. That means communication isn't just optional, it's powerful. One key stress point is media exposure. Whose news you watch, whose Facebook posts you share. Decide together what media to consume and set rules. Maybe you watch separate streams, only share neutral news, or agree on certain time limits. Managing media, instead of letting it manage you, is huge. So here's a 4-step model to make this conversation productive. Decide what matters more, your marriage or your politics. If it's the marriage, you shift from a battle mindset to respectful exchange. Figure out your conflict tolerance. Can you handle fiery debate, or do you need guardrails and boundaries? Agree on ground rules, things like no political talk after 9 p.m., no election night fights, or neutral outlets only. Constantly reaffirm your priority. If your partner needed serious help, say medical support, your first concern wouldn't be winning political arguments. That's how you know you've got each other's backs. Looking closer, opposite party couples in Britain were 38% more likely to split, and those split over Brexit risked a 60% separation probability. That's decades of data pointing in one direction. Early political misalignment can explode later. Yet there's a silver lining. Some Democrat-Republican couples report 58% satisfaction, higher than same-party Democrat or independent pairings. Their secret? Intentional communication, curiosity, empathy, and yes, even humor. They lean into differences instead of sweeping them under the rug. Here's a proactive checklist for couples. Map shared values, not just party labels. Explore things like fairness, community, trust, and let that anchor you. Boost discussion quality. Talk about the conversation. Set tone, context, and purpose so it doesn't degrade into debate. Co-create media boundaries. Decide what you watch together, separately, or avoid to preserve peace. Amplify gratitude and perspective-taking. Notice and appreciate your partner's political passion. It can transform conflict into connection. Check assumptions. If you think they feel one way about something, ask before reacting. Cultivate curiosity. Ask, teach me about why you believe that. Build smart pause strategies. If things heat up, agree to pause, take a break, and return with calm. To wrap this up, politics isn't just policy, it's identity. You're pledging your life to someone. Knowing their core values is part of that foundation. If you skip this, it's like building a house without investigating the foundation. You might get lucky, but why roll the dice? Thinking this way gives you relationship insurance with high ROI. You're not here to change each other's minds. You're here to build mutual respect, clarity, and adaptability. That's the alignment that lasts. All right, now that we've gotten into the why, as in why political conversations matter so much before you commit long-term, let's talk about the how, because that's where people freeze up. Everyone agrees that values are important. Everyone agrees that transparency is good. But then you're 2 dates in, you're making out on a couch, and suddenly asking, how do you feel about gun reform? Feels like a vibe killer. So let's talk strategy. How do you actually approach this in real life, not just in theory? First off, you don't have to be a political analyst to talk about values, and you also don't need to turn the convo into a debate. You're not trying to win a point. You're trying to find out who this person is when things get hard, or when society is in chaos. Because, spoiler alert, society will be in chaos again. That's the world now. So instead of asking, are you liberal or conservative? Try asking open-ended questions like, when you think about the kind of world you want your kids to grow up in, what comes to mind? What does fairness mean to you? What do you think the government's job is versus the individual's? Has your perspective on anything political changed in the last 5 years? Those questions are more revealing than asking, who did you vote for? And they open up a real conversation about beliefs without putting someone on the defensive. Now let's get into why this matters long term. Beyond the obvious, we don't agree, we fight stuff. Because politics isn't just about candidates and elections. It's the way people express their moral code. And your moral code is what you'll use to make every single decision in your marriage. Let me give you some real-world flashpoints where political values become practical relationship stress. Raising kids. If you and your partner have opposite views on gender identity, sex education, race, religion, or how discipline should be handled in school, that's not a theoretical difference. That's a fight waiting to happen every single time your kid brings home a permission slip. Money and taxes. Political values influence whether you believe in shared wealth, private savings, charitable giving, how you vote on school funding, and how you feel about the idea of owing anyone anything. If one person sees taxes as a civic duty and the other sees them as theft, trust me, it's going to spill into how you budget for your life. Healthcare. Say you're deciding on insurance plans, birth control, therapy, or vaccines for your kids. If one of you sees healthcare as a right and the other sees it as a luxury, you are not in the same boat. You're barely on the same ocean. Climate and lifestyle. Do you believe in sustainability? Would you rather live off-grid or in a city? One of you might think eco-friendly means cloth napkins, and the other thinks it means voting for aggressive climate policy. That stuff adds up. Extended family. Let's be real. Your political views don't just affect you. They affect how you interact with your in-laws. What happens when one set of parents flies a political flag on their porch and the other won't come over because of it? You're not just navigating your relationship anymore. You're managing 2 family systems that might be ideologically at war. So again, this isn't about nitpicking over candidates. It's about building a shared lens for how you'll move through the world as a unit. And if you're not aligned, or at least not honest about your misalignment, the cracks start small and grow slowly until they're big enough to break the foundation. Now let's pivot to how to have these conversations if they feel hard or awkward. Because yeah, most people aren't trained to talk about this stuff without it turning into a debate or a walkout. Here's a framework that works. Step 1, set the intention. Say something like, I want to understand your values better, not argue about headlines. That's it. That sets a tone of curiosity, not judgment. Step 2, ask about stories, not stances. Instead of saying, do you support insert issue here? Ask, What in your life has shaped your view on that? Personal stories humanize beliefs. And when someone feels heard, they're way more open. Step 3, define deal breakers early. You don't have to agree on everything, but you do need to be honest about what you can live with and what you can't. If you know you couldn't marry someone who doesn't believe in climate change or thinks women shouldn't have access to abortion, say it. Don't expect it to just work out. Step 4, return to shared values. Even if you disagree on the details, do you both value empathy, fairness, freedom, responsibility? Sometimes the disagreement is about how to get there, not whether those things matter. Step 5, keep the door open, not revolving. This is not a one-time conversation. You'll revisit these topics across your marriage. Values evolve. You will change. Your partner will too. But what matters is the ability to keep talking without making it a zero-sum game. Also, and this is important, don't confuse tolerance with compatibility. It's one thing to be respectful. It's another to be fundamentally misaligned and pretending it's okay. If you're constantly biting your tongue, hiding your beliefs, or feeling resentful because you can't be fully yourself, that's not compatibility. That's quiet resentment building a bomb in the closet. And finally, let's address the fear that talking about politics is a turnoff or a buzzkill. No. You know what's a buzzkill? Realizing 5 years into a marriage that your partner fundamentally disagrees with your core beliefs and values. Talking about politics isn't what kills the romance. Hiding who you are does. So here's your reminder. Healthy relationships are built on truth, even when it's uncomfortable. Having these conversations early isn't a burden. It's an act of love. It's saying, I care about where we're going enough to make sure we're steering the same direction. If you made it this far, congratulations. You're already doing the hard part, thinking about this stuff intentionally. And if you're listening to this and feeling called out, good. That's growth knocking. Answer the door. This isn't about becoming the same. It's about being different in ways that still work. And if that's not possible with the person you're with, better to find out before you're planning joint tax returns and arguing over which news network your kid gets to watch. Your relationship should be a safe place for honesty, not a political negotiation every time the world shifts. And the world will keep shifting. Your best shot is knowing, before marriage, whether your values can weather the storm. Okay, now let's talk about what happens after the commitment. Because here's the thing. Sometimes political and value differences don't show up right away. Or they show up, but you brush them off. You're in love, you're busy moving in, you're planning a wedding, you're splitting the Wi-Fi bill and binging reality TV, and life is moving fast. You convince yourself you're not that different, or worse, that love conquers all. Well, love is great, but it's not a conflict resolution strategy. Eventually, stuff bubbles up. Maybe it's small at first. One of you makes a sarcastic comment about the president. Or you're watching a show together and someone says something about gender roles or police or climate change, and suddenly it's tense. The temperature in the room changes. Someone is offended, the other person's confused, and now there's a weird energy hanging in the air. That's the beginning. So how do you handle that? Here's what you do not do. You don't pretend it didn't happen. You don't roll your eyes and go silent. And you definitely don't go online and vent to your group chat while pretending everything is fine at home. You bring it into the light. Because silence doesn't preserve peace, it just delays the explosion. Let's break this down into a few real-life scenarios that come up once people are committed and living together. Scenario 1. Raising kids with different political frameworks. You might agree on loving your child, obviously, but how you parent, what values you model, how you discipline, what you teach, is heavily influenced by your worldview. And if those worldviews differ, you're going to clash. One parent wants to raise a child with traditional values. The other is more progressive and open about gender, race, and systemic issues. These are not casual disagreements. They're identity level. And when that kid starts asking questions, or when it's time to enroll them in school, pick a curriculum, or talk about current events, you can't defer anymore. You have to make decisions, together. And if you're not aligned, that becomes a war zone. Scenario 2. Political disagreements that spill into your social life. You're invited to a dinner party. Half the guests are very vocal about their beliefs. Your partner wants to avoid the awkwardness. You want to speak up. Now you're both walking into that party with different levels of comfort and totally different expectations. Here's what this really means. Your social environments are now an extension of your political identity. And if you can't comfortably navigate those spaces together, or at least respectfully manage each other's needs, it creates a subtle wedge that only grows with time. Scenario 3, election years and voting seasons. It's October. Emotions are high. Political ads are everywhere. One of you is glued to coverage. The other wants to unplug. You're not just disagreeing about who to vote for. You're disagreeing about how much space politics should take up in your life. One person might feel like political action is a moral obligation, while the other sees it as performative or exhausting. If you're not aligned in how you engage with politics, that mismatch becomes personal. So how do you manage those situations without turning every disagreement into a battle? You create a set of relationship policies. Yes, policies, just like a government. And before you roll your eyes, hear me out. You already make rules in your relationship. When to eat dinner, how to split chores, who drives when you're both tired. So it makes perfect sense to create shared norms for how to handle emotionally charged political moments. Here are some policies that work. 1. Establish a politics-free zone. Pick one room or one time of day where no politics are discussed. Not because you're avoiding hard topics, but because you're protecting connection. Relationships need space to breathe. 2. Schedule political conversations intentionally. Don't just drop hot topics during a grocery run. Say, "Can we talk about this later when we both have the bandwidth?" Then stick to that. 3. Use values translation. If your partner says something you disagree with, try to interpret the value behind it. Maybe you hear less government spending, but what they mean is personal responsibility. Maybe they hear universal health care and assume higher taxes, but you actually mean equal access. Translate before you react. 4. Don't parent each other. You're not your partner's civics teacher. Don't assign books. Don't talk down. Don't test their knowledge. Curiosity is great. Condescension is a death sentence. 5. Agree on public boundaries. If one person likes to post politically online and the other doesn't, that's a real discussion. It's not censorship to say, "I don't feel comfortable with my private relationship being connected to your public platform." It's a conversation about identity and representation. 6. Create a values mission statement. This sounds a little corporate, I know. But seriously, what are your shared values? Compassion, freedom, equity, stability? Write them down. Refer back to them. Let them guide decisions when the policies don't match. Okay, now let's go deeper. What if you're already struggling? What if these disagreements aren't theoretical? They're recurring, painful, and draining. Here's where relationship triage comes in. Ask yourself, are you fighting about facts, or are you fighting about feeling unheard? Is your partner trying to be right, or are they trying to be seen? Are you staying silent out of peacekeeping, or out of fear? Most political conflicts in relationships aren't really about politics. They're about emotional safety. One person feels like their values aren't respected. The other feels like they're being attacked. Both shut down, and now you're not debating policy. You're defending your dignity. If this is happening often, get outside support. A counselor, a therapist, a neutral third party. You don't have to wait until things explode to get help. Smart couples ask for help when things are just tense, not tragic. Here's the honest truth. Some couples do outgrow each other, not because they hate each other, but because the distance between their values becomes unbridgeable. That's not failure, that's clarity. But many couples can grow through the tension if they're willing to have uncomfortable conversations, build communication tools, and recommit to understanding instead of convincing. If you're watching this and thinking, "This is me," then you already have the awareness most people avoid until it's too late. Use it. Talk. Listen. Don't just get through life together. Build a life that reflects who you both truly are. That's the long game. That's real intimacy. That's the kind of relationship that can outlast any election cycle, policy shift, or Facebook comment war. And if no one's told you this today, you're allowed to want clarity. You're allowed to ask the hard questions. And you're allowed to say, I love you, but I need to know we see the world in a way that works for both of us. What you really deserve is clarity in your relationships, because that's the whole point of this conversation. Understanding what you need, what your partner needs, and how to stop pretending values aren't a big deal when they're literally everything. So now that we've talked about what political values mean, how to bring them up, how they show up after commitment, and how to manage the fallout, let's talk about what it looks like to grow together, not just survive the differences. Because here's the twist. It's not about being perfectly aligned on every issue. Most couples won't be. That's fine. What matters is whether you're aligned on how you handle misalignment. That's the real test of long-term compatibility. So today's final deep dive is all about what it takes to stay connected when the world around you, and maybe inside you, keeps changing. Let's start with the biggest truth. People evolve. Your values might evolve. Your partner's values might evolve. The world changes, and it changes us. A political belief that made sense to you in your 20s might feel outdated in your 30s or 40s. Life experience, trauma, illness, parenthood, identity shifts. These things transform how we see the world. If your relationship can't hold space for evolution, it will collapse under the weight of your growth. So here's the guiding question every couple needs to ask. Can I grow and still belong here? If the answer is yes, then you're building something sustainable. But let's get practical. What does that actually look like? It looks like staying curious, not just during the honeymoon phase, but across years of knowing someone. The most dangerous thing in a relationship isn't change. It's assuming you already know who your partner is and always will be. That's how people end up sleeping next to strangers. You've got to keep asking questions like, what's something you've changed your mind about lately? What's something in the world that's been weighing on you? What would you fight for, even if no one stood with you? Is there a belief you've outgrown, but you're scared to admit it? These aren't small talk questions. These are intimacy builders. These are the kinds of conversations that make you feel emotionally naked in the best way. And here's the real gold. When your relationship becomes a place where honesty is safe, people grow toward each other instead of apart. Now, let's talk about what happens when you don't have that. When people stop growing together, they don't usually split in a dramatic explosion. They just drift. Slowly. Quietly. The values they never aligned on become jokes, then irritations, then unspoken resentments. That's how you end up with couples who sleep in separate beds, don't talk during dinner, and quietly avoid every hard conversation because they're terrified of what might come out. Don't be that couple. It's hard to come back from years of unspoken values misalignment. Not impossible, but hard. So if you're still in the early years of dating, of marriage, of parenting, this is your time to lay the foundation for that kind of trust. Now let's dig into one of the hardest parts of navigating political and moral values in relationships. When the differences aren't just philosophical, they're personal. What happens when your partner's beliefs directly conflict with your lived identity? Maybe you're part of a marginalized group, LGBTQ+, a person of color, neurodivergent, an immigrant, and your partner holds political views that invalidate part of your experience. That's not just a difference in opinion, that's a difference in reality. This is where values-based conflict becomes identity-based pain. And I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Relationships like this often don't work unless the partner who's holding those views is willing to learn, evolve, and center your lived experience. And if they're not, you don't owe anyone your silence. You don't owe anyone your tolerance if it cost you your dignity. You don't owe anyone a lifetime of emotional labor so they can feel balanced while you feel erased. So if you're in a situation like that, I want you to hear this loud and clear. You are allowed to walk away from relationships that invalidate your humanity, no matter how much history you share. You don't have to compromise your reality for compatibility. That's not love. That's survival. Now let's swing the lens a little wider and talk about family. Because political values aren't just a couple issue. Once you bring in extended family, parents, siblings, uncles who won't stop talking about the good old days, it becomes a full-blown ecosystem. You've got to ask, how will we deal with politically loaded family gatherings? How do we protect our peace when one side of the family is a Facebook comment section come to life? How do we raise kids with clarity if grandma's saying something we don't agree with? Here's what works. 1. Unified boundaries. You and your partner need to present a united front when it comes to setting limits. It's not about silencing people. It's about saying, this is our home. These are our rules. You don't have to tolerate hate speech or conspiracy theories over pie. And you definitely don't have to expose your kids to toxic narratives out of politeness. 2. Debrief after every tense gathering. Even if the dinner was fine, talk afterward. How did that feel? Did anything cross a line? What can we do differently next time? This builds trust and prevents resentment from sneaking in. 3. Practice exit strategies. Have a signal, have a phrase, have a code word that means, we're done here. Get in the car and go. Protect your peace. Now let's land this. Relationships are not political platforms, but they are the places where our politics become personal. Because love is not neutral. Love is a decision you make over and over again. To build, to grow, to listen, to challenge, and sometimes to let go. So whether you're dating, married, or still figuring out who you are, here's the bottom line. You deserve to be in a relationship where your values are seen and respected. You deserve to know that your partner isn't just attracted to you, but aligned with you. And you deserve a future that feels possible, not painful. If you're in a relationship that passes those tests, amazing. Keep doing the work, keep talking, keep choosing each other. If you're in one that doesn't, take that seriously. Because staying quiet for the sake of peace is just agreeing to long-term instability. Relationships aren't about being right, they're about being real. And there's nothing more real than asking someone, can we face the world together, even when the world is hard? That's what we're all looking for deep down. Not someone who agrees with us on every ballot measure, but someone who sees our values, honors our truth, and still says, yes, I'm in. Thanks for sticking with me through this conversation. If you loved this series, share it with someone who needs it. And let me know what topic you want to go deep on next. We've covered a lot, but we've only just scratched the surface. Until next time, ask the hard questions, tell the truth, and play the long game.